In a world where artistic trends were strictly followed and where big budgets were seen as essential to the success of a film, some brave French directors decided to stray from the norm and break the rules, resulting in a new way to make movies, where style and authenticity were found rather than bought. This movement would later be called the French New Wave, inspiring other creatives to follow in their footsteps, even in modern day cinema. My name is Sabrina Oviedo, and today I will be talking about Frances Ha, one of the best examples of a French New Wave film, if it was American and modern, of course. Written and directed by Noah Baumbach in 2012, Frances Ha is a black and white comedy drama film about an aspiring dancer struggling to make ends meet in New York City. Greta Gerwig, who also co-wrote the script with Brownbach, is our leading lady playing Frances Holiday. Frances is quirky, idealistic, and just overall deeply relatable.
Okay, I'm so embarrassed. I'm not a real person yet.
Before we get into the French New Wave inspiration behind Frances Ha, first let me tell you more about French New Wave as a whole. The French New Wave was a cinematic movement that emerged in the 1950s and 60s, where directors revolutionized filmmaking with creative and fresh techniques. Directors like Jean-Luc Godard and Agnes Varda rejected traditional filmmaking, which usually values artificial studios and lighting, big budgets, and fancy or expensive cameras. Instead, they wanted to create films with authenticity, which could look like natural lighting, on location shooting, and a focus on contemporary stories with an emphasis on existentialism or real life. One of the first places that we can see inspiration from French New Wave in the style of the movie would be the wardrobe choices. The wardrobe choices play a key role in reflecting the film's themes of authenticity and definitely shows that inspiration. Such as in Frances's clothes, you can see that she's always wearing some sort of knee-length floral dress, always has some sort of like tights underneath. It's very hipster-esque and very vintage inspired, but done in a more 2000s type of way. And same thing goes with the male characters who are wearing cardigans and fedoras or a nice dress shirt with a tie. It's very hipster like, which basically alludes to like vintage or retro. And those stylistic choices are seen throughout the movie, which is definitely showing some sort of breakaway from the modern films where usually everything was very flashy and the clothing choices were very expensive. But these clothing choices are very unpretentious. They kind of emphasize the realism over that stylized beauty. More stylistic choices that show that clear inspiration from French New Wave in the movie would include the filming, so the cinematography. Firstly, as you can see, the film is done in completely black and white. So, 2012, you have a completely black and white film coming out. It definitely shows that drawback to the inspiration. And similar to that would be the camera work. So, similar to French New Wave films where they wanted to avoid big budget studios, they wanted to avoid artificial lighting. You see in Frances Ha, and I included some pictures here, where the city of New York is the main background of the movie. If she's not running through New York, then she's sitting at a park, or her and her best friend are eating outside on a big patio with flowers. She's going through the park, dancing near fountains. The city of New York is the setting, it is the backdrop, which is definitely a clear reference to French New Wave, where usually the city of Paris would be the backdrop. So here modernized and American, we have New York City, one of the biggest cities, as the backdrop, and it's very wild. It's very vibrant. It's very full of life, very busy. And the camera work captures that really well by almost being shaky the entire time, kind of like a documentary or like a home movie. Like the camera is trying to actively keep up with Frances as she moves through the city. And I think that in itself is a clear drawback to French New Wave and how the cinematography was done to capture that feeling and that realism. The storyline of Frances Ha also shares several similarities with the French New Wave movement, particularly its approach to characters, structures, and themes. Much like French New Wave films, Frances Ha centers on a young, rebellious protagonist, which is Frances, the aspiring dancer, who is definitely going through the challenges of adulthood, love, and self identity. There's definitely some existential themes common in this new wave cinema, and we definitely see that in Frances Ha, which is similar to the 400 Blows. We're following our character as they're going through something very transformative, but also just very real and very relatable. And Frances Ha also rejects traditional narrative conventions where we kind of see a loose, episodic storyline that feels more reflective of a real life rather than this neatly wrapped up plot that we just follow from scene to scene. In many interviews, we can hear the director, Noah Baumbach, directly talking about his inspiration from French New Wave films. And in many interviews, he has cited French New Wave films as one of the influences when making Frances Ha, along with other directors of screwball comedies and things of the sort. And in other places where we can see French New Wave inspiration can be the soundtrack, where there are many scores by French New Wave composers. And the cinematography, again, black and white, the story, the style, as well as Greta Gerwig talking about how she believed the film was kind of accidentally paying a homage to French New Wave. But it's definitely very interesting to see the inspiration that was taken from the movement, to see it with a modern twist done so well. And I really enjoyed watching this movie. I really enjoyed learning more about French New Wave and the influence that it had on so many films, not just, films that we see that are paying homage to that movement, like Frances Ha, but, other movies where we see breakings of the fourth wall, or jump cuts and everything like that, and all of the innovations that came from that movement. Thank you again for watching my video on Frances Ha, which is just a great movie with a beautiful blend of modern storytelling and the spirit of French New Wave, really capturing those complexities of life and relationships with authenticity, just like the movement set out to do. Thank you so much again, and that's all for today.